Good evening and welcome to East Hampton Media's Voter Forum. Tonight we're going to interview and ask some questions to school committee candidates, and I'd like to introduce them. Peter Gunn, Sarah Hunter, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Angelique Baker, and Marissa Carrera.
Thank you.
Welcome and thank you for your participation. So in lieu of an opening statement, I just want to ask each of you, and if we could just go in that order and then we can sort of stagger in that order. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to respond as an ad hoc opening statement. Why are you running for school committee?
Well, first I want to thank East Hampton Media for giving the voters in East Hampton an opportunity to meet the 8 candidates. And I also want to thank all of the other candidates for giving the voters in East Hampton a choice. We've had a couple of election cycles where that hasn't been the case, and I think it's terrific that there are more candidates running now than ever before, since actually the first time that I was elected. In 2007, I threw my hat in the ring because there were a number of articles in the paper that summer where the school committee was struggling to have a quorum and unable to conduct its business. And as someone who was looking for a way to become more involved in the city and trying to think of what I could bring by way of an expertise as an experienced educator, I said, I think this is an area where I could contribute. So I was elected. I've served as the secretary of the school committee. I've also served as the chair of the school committee, and now I serve as a regular member. And I think my primary reason for running is that I was concerned at the number of my colleagues who are not running for re-election. I think at some point East Hampton should address by its charter the way we rotate everyone potentially in and out of office every 2 years. I think it would make much more sense if we staggered our term of service and staggered our elections so that we would not have the possibility of a complete changeover on the city council and the mayor and the school committee. So my primary reason for running is that I still have a deep desire to help the young people in East Hampton, and the best way I think I can do that is by contributing to my ideas and my voice to the quality of the educational experience that they have. And I bring my experience as a teacher, as someone whose children have attended the public schools in East Hampton, and as a longstanding member of the committee in the hope that that will appeal to the voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Sarah?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Okay. Why are you running for school committee?
So I'm running for the school committee because I believe very much that we should be serving the public in whatever capacity we can as citizens. I have a history in education. I went to the University of Toronto and got a master's degree in sociology and equity studies in education. My master's thesis was on including students with autism in the general public school environment in a more inclusive way. And I've taught before as a high school teacher for students with autism. I've also worked as a special ed paraprofessional in Greenfield and in Holyoke. I currently work at the Department of Developmental Services in Holyoke, where I work with adults who have disabilities. And before that, I worked for community resources for people with autism in East Hampton. And I learned there that through working with parents in their homes, parents of kids with special needs in the community, that a lot of parents were not very satisfied with the special ed services that they were receiving in East Hampton. And since I live here and I pay taxes and I care a lot about the schools and I know a lot of kids who go to school here and that's something that I have a background in, I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to serve. So that's pretty much what I'm bringing with me. I also have a background in facilitation, active listening, and kind of working with groups of people who don't always necessarily agree with each other. I believe a lot in just listening and trying to get as much information as I can and trying to get people to find common ground with each other. So when I heard that the school committee was expecting a few vacancies, I was excited to jump in there, and I'm excited for the opportunity to do that. So thank you.
Great. Angelique?
I have 3 kids in the school system. They're scattered out preschool, 4th grade, and high school. So I'm here for a long time, and I've been very involved in the schools, and I want to participate in a different sort of way. I wanted to kind of bring some diversity and try to represent the people that don't know that there's a school committee or how to get involved, or maybe can't make it to meetings. Or I think I'm on the Commission on Disabilities for East Hampton already, And that's something that overflows with some of my concerns with the special ed issues not being met fully in the schools. I also feel really strongly about accessibility. Like I said, I'm pretty involved in the schools, and I didn't even know there was a school committee, and so I feel like if I didn't know, that there are probably other people that didn't know. So, and I've also tried to talk to the school committee in the past, and I've never heard back any of my emails. So I want to change that. Like, I want to be talked to in the playground. I want people to write me emails and know that I'm going to get back to them. I want to hear about what other people are concerned about and see what I can do, not just to help my kids, but it's a community. Some people know me because I'm buying a Habitat for Humanity house, so like I'm here to stay, and I want them to know that I'm committed.
Great.
I also want to say thank you for having us all here tonight. I've been an East Hampton resident for almost 10 years, and my husband and I just purchased a home last year here, and we're really happy to be raising our family in East Hampton. Oliver is a second grader at Maple School, and Louisa is 6 months old, and she will join the public schools when she's of age. I am an educator myself. With a doctorate, I teach at UMass Amherst and Amherst College, courses on public policy and the history of public education. So schools are really important to me, both personally as a mother and then also professionally as an educator. I really feel like a strong advocate for equal and effective education as a sort of essential democratic good. I think that there are a lot of exciting things going on in our district, a lot of great work happening in our learning communities here in East Hampton. And I'm really proud to have my child and eventually my children in our schools. I also see a lot of challenges here from talking with community members and people in the schools, challenges around budgets and physical facilities, and as Sarah and Angelique have mentioned, some limitations in our services and our resources for our kids. And so if I were to have the privilege of serving East Hampton as a school committee member, I would really want to bring my background as somebody who has thought a lot about education and is a careful researcher and careful thinker about these issues, and then also really see myself as somebody who's available to listen to families and to educators and staff and administrators who are in our buildings, and then also to taxpayers in our community at large. So that way we can all work together toward developing solutions for these challenges.
Great. Would we like to open up the floor to general discussion now? About
Sure.
anybody's? No? I mean, it's not a question that really lends itself to it, but I did say that was the format, so I wanted to give you the opportunity. Should we move on to question 2?
Sure.
So question 2 is, could you please define the authority afforded to you as a school committee representative as provided by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
And are we going to rotate, or?
Sarah?
Okay, so my understanding is as a school committee member, I would have a responsibility to sort of both interact with the teachers, administrators, and the people, the people who are working in the schools, the students, and then also the parents who are sending students to the schools. So I could serve as a point of contact from any of those people regarding any issue in the school. I do know that there's a budget committee and there's a policy committee. I don't know a whole lot yet about kind of how much say those committees have over the actual workings of the district. But I do understand that, you know, when I was working in a school, I understood that there were a lot of decisions that were made by the school committee that we would have input into, but ultimately it was up to them in terms of bigger ideas in regards to where our money was going or kind of bigger policy concerns. So, and I also, as a public servant currently, you know, I also understand that I would be speaking, like if I was speaking to a parent as a school committee member, I would be speaking as the school district. So it's really important to understand kind of what that means, what it is that you're saying, like not making promises that you can't keep, but also like being transparent and open and accessible and making sure that people know what they're getting from you. So that's something that I would definitely keep kind of at the forefront of my mind as well.
Angelique?
I would just want to make sure that I was being the best advocate for those people that came to me with questions, make sure I do my research, get back to them. In terms of how much power is afforded to me, I'm not really sure of that yet. But I don't see it as a powerful position. Like I don't really see these people as my opponents either. Like I just feel like we're kind of people that care, and I mean, it doesn't mean I don't want to, be chosen, but I feel like we're a team, and anybody that wants to put in some work to like help the schools is fantastic. So there'll be more to learn, I guess.
Great. Marissa?
Sure, it's probably a good thing that Peter's going last on this question, because usually we'll be able to. Just to the responsibilities of the school committee members.
Since he is a
Please
school
define the
committee
authority
member.
afforded to
The
you as the school committee representative as
Okay.
provided by the Commonwealth of
All right,
Massachusetts.
great, yes. So as I understand it, as a school committee member and the committee as a group, our authority and responsibility is really to review the policies that are laid out by administrators, specifically presented to us by the superintendent, and to double check that those policies are in fact in compliance with state and federal laws governing our education. And then also to review and propose the budget that then the mayor has an opportunity to accept or to not accept. And then also, I believe that this part of the school committee's responsibility is to define the vision and mission for education in the district, and sort of articulate what are the goals for all of our students from kindergarten through 12th grade.
And I would say that each response so far is better informed than mine would have been in 2007. You learn a lot when you're elected, and I was told early on that you could boil the responsibilities and the authority of the school committee down to hiring a superintendent and voting a budget every year. Experience has taught me that there's more, and you've all touched on the key pieces. We have a finance subcommittee which works on budgetary issues. We have a policy subcommittee that works on any changes in policy, and those tend to be broader policies, but we do actually end up voting on things like the handbook for the high school and for the various schools. And I think that Marissa's point about being visionaries is important as well, because I think in the setting of a budget and in the hiring and evaluation of the superintendent, you're really having a conversation out loud about what East Hampton expects to offer its children. And so I think that the answers so far have captured most of what I understand to be. But again, I will say that there's training offered by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees for all new school committee members, and there's regular ongoing training, and there's a lot of details. But those are, the folks here have identified the main points as I understand our responsibility and our authority.
So the next question is a little more indicative of what you'll actually be doing as school committee members, and let's start with Angelique. Angelique, how would you craft a budget to reflect educational excellence given the current financial restraints?
How would I craft the budget? So first I would need to learn more about the budget, the restraints that I'm aware of, the ones that I have heard of personally, are that we don't have enough money to get the help that each of the students needs. So I guess I would review what's going on and see what we could change, slide over, or how we could raise more funds. I understand that it's tied into some of the high stakes testing, so I want to review that too. Again, not completely sure of my power in that position of what I could do, but I guess that would be my plan.
Okay, great. Sorry, it just takes me a second to reset the timer. Marissa?
Sure. Yeah, so this is, of course, probably the toughest question. How do we solve the budget problem? As I understand it, the most recent request for a budget was $18.1 million about, and that budget was not able to get passed. We ended up with lesser than that. And so we're facing a real problem where we can't even really maintain services at the level that they're at now, let alone make improvements. So how to solve that problem, I wish I really knew the answer. The one thing that I know is an issue that we've all been talking about is the charter school and school choice is a place where we can really identify a spot where we can work on the budget, because those are tax dollars that are leaving our district, and there's real potential there to turn them back around and have them heading back into our district. And so that is a place where we can both look at improving the reputation of our district and really working on outreach to our families, so that way people recognize the value of an East Hampton education and want to keep their kids here. And then also we need to think about how can we bolster our services so that way students don't need to leave East Hampton in order to get the education that they need. In terms of other ways to seek out additional funds to really get to the budget that we need, that's the place where I would, as a new school committee member, I would really find it my responsibility to seek out the expertise of people who know more about this than me, and to listen to what they might have to suggest, and then to work with the committee and hopefully with some veteran committee members who will have a little bit more experience on structuring the budget.
Okay, give me just a
Sure.
time. Okay. Peter?
I think the budget is really the beginning and the end of the story of the East Hampton public school system as it comes to the school committee. There's tremendous work that's done by our faculty, and our kids produce great learning in remarkably constrained circumstances every day in the school buildings. But at our level, the budget is always there. It's always on our minds, and the issues that have been identified already are ones that I hope are familiar to voters. I think that the state's structure for financing of public education puts parents in this community in an extraordinarily difficult position of choosing between what is best for their child's education and what is best for their community. I don't doubt that any parent who chooses to send their child through school choice or charter schools is doing what they think is best. But I don't think that any of them would like to go to bed at night or wake up in the morning realizing that the city of East Hampton is paying them to live here. But that's the reality. There are very few families that take advantage of charter or choice who pay as much in taxes as we then send out with their child. And it is the single best place that we can recover funds for the school budget. For the city budget, and it is for the whole city budget. The schools didn't get everything that we would like to provide the enriched and enhanced educational opportunities that we believe our students deserve, but we were the one division within the city's various departments that did see an increase in its budget this year. We've not always been able to have level service budgets, but the state has to change its financing methods.
Sarah?
All right. Well, I think that the challenges facing our budget situation in the East Hampton Public Schools, first of all, are not unique to East Hampton. I think this is a problem that a lot of different communities are having across the state and across the nation. So it's important to keep that in mind, because I think sometimes people get a little bogged down with, we're doing everything wrong, why isn't it working, why can't we get it to work? And I think we need to remember that this is a national problem. It's not just a problem with East Hampton. That said, I definitely want to echo what other folks have said before me in regards to the school choice and charter schools and the reputation of the East Hampton Public Schools. I've talked with a lot of parents who have had really good experiences here. I've also talked with a lot of parents of younger children who have heard of bad experiences in East Hampton, and they're moving out of the district. They're choicing their kids out of the district. I know several parents of 4-year-olds who sold their houses and moved this year to Northampton. We can't be losing young families like this, and we can't be losing families to school choice who haven't even tried the schools here. So I don't really know what to do about that. I'm not exactly sure how to address that at this point. I would like to get to know the folks who are involved in the decision making a little bit better. I want to get to know the people who are going to the schools, the students who are attending, the teachers who are teaching here, the parents who are sending their kids here, and I just kind of want to see how these decisions are being made, what are the things that have been tried in the past, what things are we, what have we done, what haven't we done, and is there anything big that we're missing, like any big grant opportunities that we're missing or anything, that we haven't looked into completely. But I think it's something that we can that we can do together, and I feel optimistic, but it's definitely not something I can do alone. So I'm glad I'm not the only one.
So at this point, I'd like to open up the conversation for general discussion. If anyone heard anything, would like to comment or question each other about any of the answers that we heard. We don't need to do general discussion, that's okay.
Well, I guess I would simply point out that my position on an override has changed. In the last election, I ran explicitly promising to be a candidate who would push again for an override just for general funding for the city. In light of the progress that we've made with the Massachusetts Building Authority, I think I would reserve judgment on that in the hope that we can rally the folks in the community to support the construction of a new elementary school. I think that is a higher priority in terms of our long-term budget planning than raising the broader tax base to fund all public services.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to say that like last night I went to a curriculum night, and why it's not directly tied in with the funding, like what I heard there was fantastic. I didn't quite know about all the little progress that was being made in the classroom, so I just want to highlight that and maybe not be 100% negative on the school.
Yeah, and I guess I could pick up on the same spirit and say that, as I understand it, even though our schools have a really limited budget, they've been making really great use of every dollar that they've gotten. And so in some cases, budget questions are about how can we trim out excess and how can we make our dollars work harder. It seems like our schools are doing a really good job already at making the most of what they do have.
Okay, great. So moving forward, this next question is my question, actually. How would you encourage, and this goes to Marissa first, how would you encourage volunteerism in the schools, or how would you craft policy which incorporates volunteers? How active would you be in exposing new people to the district?
All right, excellent. That's a really great question. I know that my first introduction to my personal introduction to the districts was as a mother of a kindergartner in Ms. Chris's class at Maple, and Ms. Chris was really generous to allow me to volunteer once a week, and I was lucky that my work schedule was flexible enough that I was able to spend a couple hours every Thursday with the kindergartners, and it really gave me such a closer understanding of the school and so much more faith in the school. I felt a little nervous just sending my child into the buildings and not really knowing what was going on. But once I myself was in the buildings, I felt so connected and really assured at the great work that was happening in our district. So I would love to see more volunteers, not only because that can provide resources and extra help for the kids and the teachers, but also because I think it's a really important thing for community members and families to feel connected and to feel like they have access to schools. So I think that there could be a lot of creative ways to get people involved. We know social media is a new and great way to reach people, particularly young families who are involved in those kinds of avenues. And then really working on maybe making liaisons between school committee and the PTO as two organizations that have a lot of investment in getting volunteers into the schools, and the PTO maybe has a little bit more access to the community and to parents themselves. So working together might be a great way to organize those volunteer opportunities.
Great. Peter?
Well, just last evening we were talking about intergenerational opportunities. Because of the demographics of East Hampton, there's an extraordinary untapped or largely untapped base that we are working to try to increase the involvement in the school, and that is our senior citizens. That not only makes good educational sense, it is also economically and politically a strategically wise thing to do, because folks who no longer have children in the schools may not know and may not be able to counter some of the things that we've talked about that are concerns about East Hampton with actual experience. And when folks come to the schools and they see what's going on, they come away with the sense that Marissa did and that others who are in the schools have. They see the great work that's done. I know that we've also talked about having some of the high school students both throughout the community come and work with elementary and middle school students in support roles, and that's a tremendous opportunity. It's a way for us to work at the language teaching concern, because there's a desire for language instruction at earlier ages, and that's a way that we can do it. And I think that people will find that there's two things you have to have. You have to be willing, number one, to make yourself available, and then you have to be willing to do what the schools need. It's really important that people arrive saying, what do you need us to help you do, rather than saying, I think this is what you need and I'm here to do that. And I think if you can do that, I know for me, working in the high school with the history and government classes has been tremendously rewarding, but it was doing what they needed and coming to respond to specific requests that they had for kinds of help. And that's a fantastic way for people to get involved in the schools.
Okay, great. I was just going to do that. That's great that you asked that. So, Sarah, how would you encourage volunteerism in the schools, or how would you craft a policy which incorporates volunteers? How active would you be in exposing new people to the district?
Okay, well, so I've lived in East Hampton for 2 years now, and one thing that I've learned from living here is that East Hampton is a town with a lot of Facebook groups, which might sound a little bit glib, but I've met a lot of people in town that way. I've met a lot of parents that way. I've gotten news out about my campaign that way. And so I think like whatever we do, we need to make sure that there is some kind of online component. I don't think people realize how much they could be doing in the schools, people who are interested in volunteering. And I don't even mean just parents. I think it might be a really good way to get some of those young families with kids who are kind of on the fence about whether or not they want to stay in East Hampton, to get them to come and kind of get involved with the schools before their kids are even enrolled. I think volunteer opportunities can go from coming to a career day and speaking with students about what your job is, to kind of helping out at a football game, or selling snacks, or doing some kind of weekend or evening event. We always need chaperones for dances, which everybody loves. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and I think we definitely do need to let people know that they're out there and what they are, and we'll learn that by talking to teachers and talking to administrators who are kind of on the ground and know what their schools need. It's also a good way to deal with some of the budget issues as well. If we have people who are actively working on coming up with school supplies, or raising money for specific projects or trips or things like that. So I think there's a lot of good that we can do with volunteerism, just in increasing the amount of commitment that the community has to the schools, which will end up changing the reputation of the schools, which is something that we talked about before. So I think there's a lot of good reasons to do that. I think we just, we need to have a broad reach. We need to be checking out social media. We need to be kind of catching people in unusual places, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of how I've been thinking about it.
Okay, great.
So
let me repeat the question for you, because it's a long question. How would you encourage volunteerism in the schools, or how would you craft a policy which incorporates volunteers? How active would you be in exposing new people to the district?
Okay, so I will learn how to craft a policy if I'm chosen, and I would be, I think my main thing that I would do is be available. I was thinking about, I know like the Coffee with the Cops and some other things have worked out good, Coffee with the Mayor, so I think that I could definitely devote an hour or 2 weeks, like making myself accessible for people to come ask me questions, how it works. And I just want to take a little bit of a different angle on volunteering. I think there's a lot of shame from parents that can't make it because they work, or they're disabled, or they're just afraid of the school. So I feel like volunteering starts with maybe asking your kid like how their day was, or helping them with homework, because that has such a major trickle-down effect to how the child then feels about school in general. And that is volunteering. And I know with some other preschools, they actually count that, and they get funded from the government for every hour that the parent works on their EBCs or counts with their kids. So I think that would be something I'd want to encourage more, because we need to get people to realize just like such a small little thing is so huge and impactful. And then of course, then the other things will follow. They'll follow right into place. People will feel more connected, and then they'll show up for these things, whether they have kids or they don't have kids. So I guess that's what I would do.
Great. Any open discussion? Would anyone like to expand on something that they heard?
I think that coffee idea is a really good idea.
Thank
I like
you.
that.
So we did have a superintendent in the town where I live in who did regular coffee hours. She went around
Okay.
to different sites. It's a kind of scattered rural district, so that was helpful. A lot of people enjoyed that kind of outreach and the accessibility of just being able to talk to
Yeah.
the lady behind the desk.
People
Or
love
me-
coffee.
Or maybe at a park, because if people have kids and they want to be able to talk, maybe their kids can be over here. And I know that some of the events, they offer childcare, and that's so, I mean, sometimes that's the difference between if I'm coming and volunteering or not. And so if we're able to keep doing that and funding that, or having volunteers, actually, I think it's volunteers that usually do that, that would be so helpful. Keep it up.
Okay, so moving on to the next question, we're shifting gears a little bit, but Peter, I'm going to start with you. How do you envision the partnership between the school district and community television?
Well, the school district benefits from community television in that it is one of the primary ways that we communicate our discussions and deliberations about policy. And it's a place where we invite people to come at public speak and have the opportunity to have their ideas and their questions and their proposals recorded and then made available regularly throughout the intervening weeks until the next school committee meeting. I think if I can turn the question in a slightly different way, and some of my colleagues have already identified this, the piece in education that is different and new for many folks of my generation, and I think perhaps older than me, is the amount of marketing that needs to occur. And I think that we are only beginning to figure out the best ways for traditional public schools to communicate effectively with what in many ways is becoming a customer base. And I know some people don't like to use that business language, but school choice and charter schools are premised around the idea that competition is a good thing, and that's definitely a market model that comes from the world of business. So I would hope that the continued use, for example, this later this fall and this winter, when the students at East Hampton High School are preparing for their We the People competition that they participate in every year, I think having those filmed by East Hampton Media and again put up on a regular loop so that people in the community can see the extraordinarily terrific scholarship and work that's done by some of our students. Also in terms of athletics, in terms of the arts. There are a lot of wonderful things that people can't access because they can't physically be there. So I hope that we can continue to expand, not just because it's marketing, but because it's good community interaction to provide the opportunity for people to know what kinds of great things are going on in their schools.
Great. Sarah, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
How do you envision the partnership between the school district and community television?
Well, I think it's really cool, first of all, that community television is in one of the schools. I think it's really good for the kids to see kind of career-wise, kind of what a television studio looks like. It's cool that they can walk by it every day. Obviously, the teachers and some of the students. And so I think that the physical location is really, really great. I think a lot of what you were just saying before about, it kind of boosting the morale of the students to see their work on display, to see their performances being given airtime. And I think you're also right about the competition aspect of it. It's really good for people to be able to see what the schools look like and to sort of see what it is that the students are doing. So I sort of envision a partnership that just continues to grow, I would hope. And I think there's a lot of cool creative things that we can do with the partnership between community television and the public schools. And I'd love to be a part of working on that.
Great. Angelique?
I was not aware there was such a huge partnership already. I
There
think.
isn't. It's not huge. Just
Well, to me, it's huge.
I'm internalizing it a little bit, but
so-
it's there, but it's not huge.
So it's not there in other communities. So to me, it's huge because things are really accessible for people that can't make it there. They're working. They have some more than one child. Like they're sick. You can still be there. You can still be present at all of these things. And, sometimes I view things that are, my kids are not even in those grades. I'm just like, wow, like I heard really good reviews about such and such. So I'm imagine that it's going to get better and better. And now that I've met everybody here, like then that would just, like now I see the operation. I think that's so important. So it would just get better.
Great. Marissa?
Yeah, I think I'll probably end up echoing a bit of what everyone has already said here, but yeah, it was kind of exciting to walk into Whitebrook Middle, to get to this studio and to be reminded how much public education and public TV are really important common goods that we have here, and public TV is a form of education itself that we have to connect with community members. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to make those sort of promotional efforts to make our schools and the work of our kids available. I'm also thinking about, I don't want to script teachers into more work than they already have, but how fun would it be to do highlights on different teachers and just do little spotlights where we get to highlight their accomplishments and who they are and what they're interested in, and give people more access to who's working in our building.
Okay, I'd like to open the floor to discussion on my pet topic.
Great idea, Marissa.
Thank you.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
I think it's a fair criticism to make that we probably have not availed ourselves enough of the opportunities. And I suspect that that's true for a variety of reasons, but it's great to hear the suggestion in response to an earlier discussion. I was thinking how few people in the community know that the State Department of Education has cited 5 school districts in the Commonwealth for having outstanding professional development. Mm-hmm. One of the ways that we could get that out is to have that information running that East Hampton is one of those 5 school districts. It's the only one outside the 128 sort of beltway that is put up as an exemplar of outstanding professional development. A virtue born of the financial difficulty we face is that we do it in-house, and we have extraordinary educators here who can do something. The other districts' professional development models involve resources that we don't have, so it's really a case of which one of these is different than all the others and nonetheless just as good. So that's an example of something that if we even had a simple banner read up on the community television, I think that would be really helpful, and that's probably an area where we need to devote more time, and it might connect back to what we were saying before about having a volunteer, a parent who might volunteer to help us manage some of those kinds of announcements.
Absolutely. I really like the idea of athletics and performances being broadcast as well. I think that would have meant a lot to me as a student. I think that would mean a lot to students now, and to their parents as well. And like if you get like a student's with the internet and with the way that people use the internet now, like somebody puts up a football game that's been played, and then a parent manages to get a clip of it and they share it on Facebook, and you see that it's from East Hampton and East Hampton Community Television, and I think that's really, really cool, and that's good for our town in a lot of different ways. So I'm excited about it.
Anyone else?
I just look at social media and stuff like this as kind of like instead of having like a hard copy of a yearbook, like everything's kind of documented in pictures. So it's a little bit more exciting.
Okay, well, moving on to the next question, which has been touched on a little bit. Each year, wait, who am I? 1, 2, 3.
It's Sarah.
Sarah, thank you. It seems really simple to keep track of it, and then you don't. So each year we hear feedback that choice in charter schools negatively impact our district. What local solutions can you propose?
Like local within our district, I guess.
Local within your
Yeah,
district.
like really local. Okay. So I think the whole issue of charter schools, Charter schools started out a little bit over 20 years ago, as being a way of testing out new kind of exciting pedagogies that we didn't really have space for in the public schools yet, just to see how well they worked. And then the idea was that after starting it in this charter model, you would then be able to move these new ways of doing education into the public schools. And I think we've seen nationally that that is not how charter schools actually work. A lot of times they start out with those great ideas, and then for various reasons we're not able to move those ideas into the public schools, and now there's a lot of for-profit charter schools that are starting up too, that are basically operating in the same way, you know, that a lot of other schools are operating, without a whole lot of new ideas or kind of creative ways of problem solving. So I think we've seen that charter schools are not delivering what we were promised 20 years ago when, you know, the model first was introduced. So I think locally, like I said, what we need to do is we need to give parents a reason to trust us and to trust us with their kids. Some parents have really, really good reasons for not feeling like they can trust us. Some parents are just scared, and the charter schools are able to market a little bit better than we are, and because they need to, because otherwise people won't send their kids there. So, you know, we need to kind of counter that by showing them that our schools are just as good, or better in some situations. So I think a lot of the ideas that we've already talked about here are really good ideas, kind of expanding volunteer opportunities, having those coffee hours with parents so that they can kind of come and get to know people ahead of time. You know, putting more student performances and things on television. I think all of those can make a big difference. But it's not going to be something that we can really change in a simple policy or kind of overnight. We really need to show people that they can trust us and that we're listening. So that's kind of where I would begin.
Can you just repeat it?
Yeah. Each year we hear feedback that choice in charter schools negatively impact our district. What local solutions can you propose?
So I think that I would want to open better lines of communication between the parents at the charter schools, even if they're not necessarily from East Hampton, and see what the draw is, and then see if we have the equivalent, and if not, if enough people want it, what we could do to bring it there. I know my understanding was that they work at the kids' level and let the kids work at whatever level they're at, which kind of ties into not necessarily like the special ed IEP stuff, but like the other spectrum of kids that tend to be a little bit more advanced and or have different learning styles. So I think that if we just the key is just to listen a little bit more and then sit down, do some brainstorming, and figure out what we can do, and maybe make like a short-term goal of how quickly we want to reach it, and then a longer-term goal. Thanks.
Marissa?
Excuse me. I think earlier Sarah mentioned that there's that critical moment of like families with 4-year-olds, and they're making that decision about whether they're going to enroll in the public school here in East Hampton or whether they're going to be searching outside. And so I think that's a real opportunity to invite those families to come and see the schools and to talk with, I think the PTO actually has organized an event in the past where 4th and 5th graders are able to come and talk to the families and to these preschoolers and let them know what their experience has been like in the school so far. And then the other thing that I'm thinking about, which I'm not sure how feasible it is, but I wonder if we have access to a list of the students who have left our district already, who might be older, and perhaps it would be worth courting them a bit, you know, reaching out to them and asking them to come back and take a look at what we have to offer. So that way they know that we are interested in having them at our schools and that we would like to give our time to thinking about what they need and what might draw them back into East Hampton. And then also I want to add that at the level of local politics and local governance, I think it's important to remind our citizens that charter schools take our tax dollars, but they aren't accountable to the voting public the way that public districts and the school committee is in fact accountable. It's chosen by voters and then accountable to voters. And so in terms of developing local support for our public districts, I think that's a really important issue to keep in the minds of citizens. Peter?
Sure, this is well-traveled ground for me. I am, the theory is compelling. The reality is devastating. Charter schools have failed, as Sarah pointed out, to accomplish their mission. The flow of innovative ideas from the 5 charter schools that East Hampton students attend back into the East Hampton School District is minimal. It barely registers. And that was one of the major arguments in favor of charter schools. They would be innovation hotspots that would then improve practice everywhere else. That has not turned out to be true, and in fact, the very nature of the design is that they have it in their self-interest not to share what is unique to them so that they can continue to draw students away. So it's not difficult to understand why that promise has not been fulfilled. I think Angelique's point about who is served well there is also clear. We've done the study in East Hampton, and the families that go are disproportionately from the upper end of the income perspective and are disproportionately not students who need special needs, which leaves the students in the East Hampton School District with fewer resources and just as great a challenge, and has perhaps is part of why some of the concerns have been raised about the service to special needs students, although I would argue that East Hampton does an extraordinary job with special needs students, and that perhaps the reason people are frustrated is they know that they can't find something better in the charter school world to serve special needs students. So, the final point that I would make about charter schools is that they divorce people from the central institution that defines communities. And whatever you may think of them educationally or economically, socially, they atomize communities. They make a town just a place where people live instead of a place where they raise their children and build their families and build deep connections. Thanks.
Which is great because now we can open it up to everyone else.
Well, another thing that I was thinking about too is, we're like kind of in a tight spot here in terms, we've got Northampton nearby, which has a really good reputation. West Hampton does as well. We have Hilltop Charter right in town, not Hilltop, Hilltown. So Hilltop's a different place.
It's confusing because they're in an industrial park.
Yes, but so we're kind of in a tight spot here. We've got several pretty good charter schools around too, in addition to Hilltown. So people can also choice into our district if they wanted to, and if we had if people felt like they wanted to go here, and some people do in fact, and so that's kind of something else we should keep in mind. It's not necessarily like all problems with East Hampton or something that we're doing wrong. We're just geographically very, very unlucky in this situation. But that said, there's obviously things that we could do to improve. But I've been thinking a lot just about where we are geographically and how unideal it is in some ways.
I might be taking this question a little bit out of the scope that you initially intended, but I know we're getting pressure from the governor to increase the number of charter schools in Massachusetts, and it seems like a real responsibility of the school committee as a group of citizens who are particularly invested in the schools to communicate our concerns about what that will mean for our public schools and to sort of create a unified position on this issue.
The mayor and the superintendent and I sent a letter that was part of the legislative hearing where the governor testified, and we believe, but we're the authors, so we'll leave it to other folks to make the real judgment on it, that it outlines the economic and educational consequences of charter schooling as it is, and if it were to be expanded. The governor strikes me as an intelligent person, and yet when he says that this has no negative economic impact on communities, we don't know where the numbers are coming from, because just charter alone is $750,000 that the city loses. $750,000 in this budget cycle that leaves the city because of students attending charter schools. So I don't know where the governor has gotten that, but when the governor gets up and says that, if you repeat it often enough, people will believe it, particularly people who want to believe it, because it relieves them of the tougher issue, which is how do we provide families with the choice to go there, but not rob the school districts that they're coming from.
Well, thank you so much for sending that letter.
Yeah, I think it's a good letter. But the mayor and the superintendent did the hard work of looking at the numbers. Those statistics that I cited earlier about who takes advantage and the student breakdown, it's extraordinary. It is almost the opposite of what the other argument beyond innovation was that charter schools would serve underserved students and underprivileged students. The students in the Valley who take advantage of charter schools are not, by and large, the most underserved or underprivileged. They tend to be at the other end of the spectrum. And people don't want to talk about that because, again, it puts those families in the very difficult position of taking advantage of something that is legal for them to do, but is ethically challenging if you are truly committed to the community that you live in.
And also, like when we were talking about special ed before in terms of charter schools do not provide special education services the same way that public schools do, even though technically they're supposed to. I've worked with families of students with pretty severe disabilities who have to go to out-of-district placements, which is not a charter placement. An out-of-district placement happens when the student's needs cannot be met within the school district, and then they're either sent to another school district or they're sent to a private school. And I actually find that really sad, because those kids also deserve to grow up in their communities, and they deserve to be a part of their communities. They deserve to go to homecoming and to go to prom and to go to school dances and to get to know their same age peers and to get to be with their neighbors and their friends and their cousins. And their siblings too. And so like the fact that we also send so many children out of district because we're not able to meet their educational needs here, that is really distressing to me for the same reasons. So I'm glad that we're all working together on that too.
I'm just wondering if there would be any benefit, because I know we talked about talking to the families from the charter schools, but I'm wondering if we talk to people, if there's a way to talk to kids that have graduated and what they've done. And I know I've seen some billboards and stuff from colleges and stuff like that. If that would help raise the morale of the town at all, that people are going on and doing things and having some benefit from what they're receiving, and maybe figure out how they made the school work for them.
I think that's a great idea.
We walk a fine line as a school committee between making the case for why we need additional funding and then inevitably contributing to a sense on this issue of morale. And I think the greatest antidote to that is for people to hear from current and former students and to witness the work that's done by current and former teachers, and to hear about that, because you can get discouraged. The budget cycle weighs very heavily on you as a school committee member. I sometimes feel like it's proceeding over a funeral. And it's an extraordinary distraction from the great things that are happening. And so you have to simultaneously make two arguments to the community. Yes, we need more resources, and look at the tremendous work that we're doing with the limited resources that we have. Sometimes people will say, well, therefore you don't need them. We would say, for example, $750,000, that's 15 teachers. We've had presentation after presentation at school committee meetings, and we need to do a better job of getting this out, where when we target reading coaches, when we target math tutoring and other ELA support services, we see a jump in the scores that so often is what the public uses to inform their view of East Hampton. So we do a good job when we have the resources to put it there. When $750,000 leaves, we then get the double punishment, because we no longer see those jumps, and people say, aha, therefore, we need to make some change. So it's a very difficult line to walk between the two sides of it, because they're both true. We need more resources, and we're doing a tremendous job with the resources that we have to provide a high quality education.
And you just mentioned 15, you could pay for 15 teachers, but
Every year.
There's been like a lot of turnover in terms of principals, like at the high school, and some special ed directors, and like I'm not really sure why that is. Is it the salaries? Is it, I don't know yet, but so that's just interesting to know that all that money could go, might be an incentive towards keeping the teachers here so that the students can go to the same people and the parents can work with the same directors, and because it's hard to start over for everybody.
Okay, moving on. Thank you for that discussion.
That open discussion really worked.
It was good. It's good. Sometimes debates are a little constraining, and there needs to be an expansion of an idea, but there isn't that into the format. Hey, Anderson Cooper did it last night, so we'll do it tonight.
But we were all like on the same page about a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
So this question is for Angelique. Starts with Angelique. Do you think that the possibility of using a Prop 2.5 override to increase school funding should be explored? And if so, what would you do as a school committee member if elected to explore such an override?
So my understanding, I might need you to repeat it, of the Prop 2.5 override is revolving around taxes and having a 2.5% increase. So what was the second half of the?
Should it be explored? And if so, what would you do as a school committee member, if elected, to explore such an override?
So that's interesting you asked that, because I'm about to be a homeowner, so that will definitely apply to me in a more personal way. Yes, I think it should be explored, just because I think that 99% of all ideas should be explored, because they might not sound fantastic up front. People have initial reactions, but once you sit down and figure out how it's going to affect everybody, it can change. And how might I do that? How might I explore it? Like, I need to learn more about it, to be honest with you, in terms of where the money is going to come from, how it's going to impact each family individually, how it's impacting them financially at home every year versus is it helping their child. But it also impacts people that don't have children, so those people are going to be on the fence about it as well. So I guess a little more like outreach and talk to some families that don't have children in the system. That's how I would do it initially.
Okay, thank you. Marissa, would you like me to repeat the question?
I think it's all right, but thank you. I hope I remember. I think districts and school committees have a real responsibility to taxpayers to use the money that we take from taxpayers really responsibly and respectfully. And so any part of exploring an override means listening to community members who, as Angelique said, may or may not have children in the districts. We had a question on the ballot in 2012, which did not pass, but we were before that able to pass one in order to get the new high school building. And I think that, I think Peter might have mentioned this before, that I think that's where the greatest possibility lies with an override, is if we can get funding from the school building authority for a new K-8 building or some sort of configuration of new building, whatever that might look like, that might be a way that we can use taxpayer money really wisely to make some big improvements to our structures, but then also to our education opportunities more broadly. Of course, ultimately it is up to the voters to decide whether there's the political will here in East Hampton to put that kind of investment into our schools. And as a school committee member, I think it would be my responsibility to really communicate to taxpayers what that money is going to do and how it's going to be used, and what ultimately we see as the vision for what that money can do for education, for kids, and then also for the health of our community. Taxpayers and property owners here benefit from schools being really in a healthy state. So, as always, those conversations across from administration to educators to families and community members, really keeping everybody's voices in that conversation.
Peter?
Yeah, I think the question of an override really comes down to direct and indirect benefits to the whole community. The advantage to an override is the whole community benefits. The city council and the mayor would have more resources that they could apportion out across all the divisions, from the emergency services to the public works to the schools. If we do an override for another school building, that also is advantageous to the community, but it is indirectly advantageous to the community as a whole. So I did in the past support an override, and I still think in the long run, a general override. When Prop 2.5 was passed, East Hampton was already a fiscally conservative community. So we were not one of those poster child communities that was spending far beyond what many people in the public thought was appropriate, and then we were stuck with this 2.5% limit, and we've been bumping up against it ever since. So in general, I still favor a Prop 2.5 override because I think it benefits the whole community, but I believe right now our best bet is to invest our resources in an override for one of the three options through the Mass School Building Authority.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to end up saying a lot of what other people have already said here, but I also would support an override for the new school building in particular. I feel like we have really relatively low property taxes here in East Hampton when compared to neighboring communities. And I don't really see a reason why we need to have such low property taxes here. But I also understand that like there are a lot of other people who live in this town. I'm not the only one. And we need to make sure that we can make the point to those other folks as well, because it is their money. So again, just like we've been talking about all night, we need to show people that they can trust us. We need to show people that they can communicate with us. We need to show them that we're being honest with their money and that we're being honest in what we're telling them. And we need to make them feel like they're a part of the process, because if we don't get everybody's buy-in on this, we're not going to be able to do it. So I believe very strongly in making sure that everybody feels like they can communicate about this issue and that their ideas are valid, whether or not they have kids currently in schools, whether or not their kids are in charter schools or private schools or out-of-district placements. It's important for everybody to feel like their voice is heard, and that so that even if they don't completely agree with it, they might at least trust us enough to try it. So that's me.
Okay, great. Angelique? Wait, did I start?
I started
with
it.
you.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's too much. Any general discussion on that?
Key term is investment. You know, at times of difficulty, it is often extraordinarily difficult to invest, because investment is something where you will not see the gains immediately, but you will feel the costs right away. And yet, I agree with Marissa and my other colleagues here who've said that if we make the decision to invest, this will be a vehicle by which we can turn around school charter and school choice. And so there's a return. There's a financial return to the community. Every family that doesn't leave, or every family that chooses to return, I think it's much more likely that we can retain people, keep them from leaving rather than necessarily pulling them back. But every one of those families, it's somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 of payment on that investment. And so for those reasons, I think that we need to frame it. We need to be prepared for some really tough questions. That was one of the most difficult discussions that I faced as a member of the school committee and as a citizen in East Hampton, was talking about the override, because it does affect lots of people in the community in varying ways, depending on their economic circumstances. But as a long-term investment for a senior citizen, Social Security is contingent upon the earning capacity of young people. So the best bet for the long-term viability of Social Security is a great education system. But that's a complicated argument to make, but it's part of the school committee's job to make it.
Would it also be safe to say, like, crime would go down when kids feel good about themselves and they're not as bored, when they feel involved in the schools and there's activities for them to do, they're not getting into trouble, like then it trickles down to the families, and the families are getting along better. And I just want to like talk numbers real quick. So like for like a $100,000 home, which is no home, like that's like $250 a year. And then, so you just add that, because I don't know if everybody knows exactly how that works. So that'd be like a $200,000 home would be $500.
That's roughly what the taxes, the 2.5 means that the taxes can go up by 2.5.
Right, like in addition.
So an override would be anything beyond that.
Right. Okay.
Okay. This next question is for Marissa to start. How will you deal with budget shortfalls, especially the unexpected ones? And if you had to cut, what specific area would you go after first?
Oh. Oh my goodness.
It's a horrible question. I'm going to stop the time. It's a horrible question, but this is a reality
Right.
that you all will be facing if you're elected to this board.
That's right.
Okay, go.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to be evasive on this question, and I don't want to do that. I know that that's probably the most difficult thing that a school committee member faces, is when they have to pass a budget, that doesn't have the funding that's necessary to keep the resources and the services available. In what I've read about the budget, it seems like it's really tight as a drum at this point. I can't imagine where we could cut that wouldn't be really devastating for our students. So I'm afraid that I don't have a great answer to this question, and this would again where I think my approach to this would be to really seek out the expertise of people who might have some savvier understandings of how to work the budget and how to look for places to have the most minimal impact on our students and our educators.
Okay.
Yeah, I empathize with you in the response because even having done it, it's hard not to sound evasive because it's a decision we never want to take. An easy way out, which on more than one occasion, is to just stand on principle and say, I'm going to vote for a level service or a level service plus budget, knowing full well that the community can't support that. The more challenging end comes, and I remember when I was serving as the chair, we had to make a difficult decision about reducing a vocational program, a popular vocational program at the high school. And the testimony that, we were in this building, we were right down the hallway here, and it was standing room only, on one of the rare occasions that a school committee meeting draws that kind of a gathering of folks who expressed their profound affection and desire and love of what we had and asking us to find somewhere else to save the money. And we get information from the superintendent, who gets information from her department heads and from the business manager about the challenges we face. And we worked hard to find some other place in the budget that year where we could make the change, and we couldn't. So we had to do it there. And I think that comes back to what Marissa was saying before about, at some point, you have to balance whatever the popular desire is with, if not deference, at least respect for the opinion of the educational leaders in the community, the superintendent, the building principals, and the department heads, about where do we make this painful cut in the least painful and the most educationally appropriate way. And then you sit and you work with those two parameters, and then you cast a vote, and you have to cast a vote, and then you're on record. And it's one of the most difficult votes that I've taken as a public servant, and I'm glad that it was a nearly unanimous decision, because I think it reflected the fact that the school committee had done its homework and knew that there was nowhere else that we could make it, and it was important to make that decision unanimously because it limited the amount of division in the community afterwards.
Sarah?
Yes, and I'm also going to be irritatingly evasive with this question because I also feel like, as you were saying, Marissa, the budget is really, really tight. I still feel like a relative outsider to this whole process. I'm not on the school committee. I don't have any kids in school right now. So before answering that question, I would really need to do a lot more research around kind of what we're spending our money on now, how much money we need to save. If we cut that money, is that program still going to be able to survive, or is that program going to have to fold if that money is cut? Those are all things that go into thinking about that. So I'd want to make sure that, like you were just talking about, that my colleagues and I were unanimous in our opinion before we went forward with anything, because I think that is a very sensitive thing, especially in a district like East Hampton. We'd want to make sure that that we were communicating effectively and trying to get people to at least understand where we're coming from, even though they're going to hate it either way. So I wouldn't want to say which thing I would cut until I knew a lot more information about what was out there.
Okay. Angelique?
I wouldn't know what to cut. I would have to look into it, but I'm just wondering if it's feasible to, I know we can't make everybody happy, but is it feasible to send out in the mail or something, what are people comfortable with being cut? I know that everybody doesn't know what the budget's made out of, and I don't know right now, as some of you said, so I'd have to look at that. But it just, when people feel like they're part of the process, it takes the animosity a little bit down, and then they feel, maybe sad, but a little better about the decision. And then when we make cuts, are they permanent or are they temporary? So I think that would be important to visit and say, well, there's a potential for this coming back. This is temporary until we can figure something out. So,
Any general discussion on this topic? I know it's not the favorite topic. It's not the fun topic. I think that in closing out our evening together tonight, I'm going to ask one final question, and then we won't have discussion after this, but it will be your parting thoughts with the audience in the city, which is, and I'm going to start, it's Peter's turn, so I'm going to start with you, Peter. What is your vision, and what can you realistically accomplish in the upcoming term? What is your vision overall?
Well, I I think my vision is that the mission statement that we have is a good one. We want all of the young people in East Hampton to have access to a quality education that prepares them for a career or college, whichever they and their family think is the next appropriate step. That requires that we be pretty nimble, because the kinds of careers that young people are entering now often require more than just a high school education. It requires specialized vocational skills in high school, and we need to work hard to be sure that we can preserve those traditional avenues of access to great job opportunities. The collegiate world is more competitive than ever because American colleges have discovered that international students really admire the education that we offer here. And so outstanding students from East Hampton are competing for spaces in great schools with an even wider body of terrific students. So as with so many things in East Hampton, we have to pursue equity and excellence at the same time with limited resources. I do think that the upward arc of the East Hampton public school system and the community are such that we will have the human resources and the fiscal resources with override for the new school building and the positive add-on effects that that will have, so that we will never escape the tough choices, but that we will be able to provide the kind of leadership educationally here in East Hampton where folks are going to want to come to this school system and build their family life in this community, and that they will see their children well served.
So my vision for the East Hampton Public Schools is I would like to see a school district where every student has equal opportunity and access to a free and appropriate public education. And currently, free and appropriate public education is the legal language used when talking about a student with a disability and their rights to education within a school district. It comes from the IDEA Act. I think free and appropriate public education is a really good way of thinking about education generally. Students need to be able to access college preparatory courses if that's what they want to do. They need to be able to access more vocational courses if that is more of what they need. They need to be able to access special education services at all levels and as many kinds of special education services as possible. I want to make sure that as many students living within this district can grow up in this community. And to me, growing up in this community means going to these schools. But that's my vision. And then in the like very short term that I'll have to do that vision, I'm hoping to use my background and expertise in special education, and particularly around education of students with autism and students with severe special needs, in making sure that those students' needs are being addressed and thought of and are kind of a part of the discussion, as well as the more general population. And I would hope to be able to make connections with the parents of those students and their teachers and paraprofessionals, so that maybe the programming could improve in the future. I do think that is a big issue. Because I'm kind of a data-driven person, I would love to kind of be like, this many students are out of district now, and like by the time my term is over, this many students won't be. I can't actually do that, but I wish I could, because I really want to set a goal of making sure that more students can grow up in this community. So that's it.
Great. Angelique?
So it might sound a little hokey, but I feel like my goal is to, I want to be able to meet parents where they're at, or families or kids where they're at, and I just really want everybody to feel so included and welcome, and that a meeting is not like above their level, or the language being used is like hard to calculate, and I want people to feel empowered. I guess that's what it is. I want, and it may be a little hokey. I envision like not enough seats for people because all of a sudden they feel like what they have to say matters, and we're having a good discussion, because I don't always, I'm not always right. So I need to be able to listen to other people and in a respectful way and hear what they say, and then they'll want to contribute more, and it'll just, that's what I envision.
Okay, great. Marissa?
One of the things that I really like about the vision statement as it's currently articulated by the school committee is that our schools should not only prepare our students to be to be ready for either a college or a career pathway, but that it also should be preparing our students to be lifelong learners. And I really like that idea that our schools can be a place that enrich our children's lives, not only so they can meet the standards and pass the exams and get their degrees, but so they can really grow as citizens and as humans. And so that really requires valuing our schools as important centers of our community. In terms of what I can accomplish, what I might be able to accomplish as a school committee member, I think one of the things that I've learned from studying the history of education is that the people who tend to think they really have the solutions are people who haven't yet tried. So I want to really acknowledge that I think that there is that reform in schools really takes patience and humility and cooperative work and working together with people who have a lot of knowledge about what the schools need. And so that means talking to educators and staff who are in our buildings, and that means talking with families who are sending their children to our schools. And I would ultimately hope that with hard work and with dedication, that I could really support the schools as the heart of our community, as a place that we really nurture and commit to grow and develop.
Great, thank you. Well, candidates, I'd like to thank you all for coming. It was a very fly-by-night thrown together forum/debate, and I really just want to acknowledge that your participation is crucial, and I know that you all tried very hard to be here tonight. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for making
Thank
it
you.
a success. Thank you to Mary Cerez and Chris Lindahl for being here and covering it, and for your contributions to tonight too. That's it for tonight, and tomorrow we'll have the other 4 candidates. Thank you for tuning in.